getting so excited about that music. And well, this is the next of our session in our Team AI series, hosted by Kalpesh every time. Thank you, Kalpesh, for launching these. A great asset to us as a non-executive in team and also our regional director. And you've introduced us to a bit of a legend here, haven't you, Toy?
He is a legend.
So,
but he doesn't like to talk about it.
I know he doesn't, but we forced him to today. So, Toye, welcome to the team session.
Yes, a pleasure.
It's great to have you here. You're the founder. You're a founder and a business leader coach. I'll give you a couple of seconds in a second to just talk about who you are. And today we're redesigning leadership time in the AI recruitment era. So, yes, if you can give us a bit of an overview of you and what people are going to get from the session today, that would be fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. First of all, Simon, thank you for having me and Kalpesh as well. So it's a great honor and privilege. Yeah, my background as a leadership coach and trainer, I was fortunate to be part of S3 during its heydays of scaling. Prior to that, I was already a business and leadership coach. But when I joined S3 in 2010, I was fortunate to help train, develop over about 2,000 of the leaders that have gone on to do great things. And yeah, with my 20 years experience, now I'm helping founders in businesses to help them scale their business. So today, since we are talking about AI, it's the one thing that has changed a lot of things. So we have to now redefine and redesign leadership and how we now manage our time. And those are some of the things that we're going to talk about and just hopefully throw out some nuggets of things that we can take away and put into practice.
Yeah, I always think time is the biggest enemy of the recruiter in lots of ways. So this is a great subject to tackle today. I'm gonna duck off the video because you guys are the two important ones. I'm in the background. I'm going to challenge you later, Toye, with some questions. People, if you're watching, please feel free to put your comments and chat in the. If you've got questions for Toye or Kalpesh on any of the session, please fire it in, and we'll either cover those live, and Kalpesh will facilitate the Q&A, or we'll chase them all up at the end. So away you go, Toye. Thank you very much indeed. Cheers for now. I'll be back soon.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. Yeah. So as I mentioned, well, first of all, as I introduced myself, we are going to be talking about redesigning leadership. Well, I've already introduced myself. So I think the reason why this is an important topic, but first of all, just maybe hear from Kalpesh, because Kalpesh hasn't even said anything. Do you want to say anything?
No, I did this for a change, Toye. I know I'm not very good at keeping quiet the best of times. I think, look, for me, with the series that we're building out here, for those of you that missed the first two, by the way, it is available on Teams Hub if you have missed it. The first session we talked about is how to prompt like a pro. So how do you start writing better prompts, whatever platform you're using, and we talked about the framework that we Tim's put together. The second session we talked about episode 2 was around when do you use AI? And the misconception we have today is AI can do everything, everywhere, anyhow. And we talked about actually there are some things that should remain human, some things that should remain hybrid, and some things that should remain the other side. So I think really for me is how do we start actually working through some of these areas as we come through? And the third element, so and you and I have had the privilege of knowing each other for far too long. I did have hair, but and you have a quote, and I'm not going to take away your quote because you use it later on about time and humans. But one of the biggest struggles I tend to find with talking to anyone as founders, leaders, operators, etc., is this AI thing. It's stealing more time away from us as leaders and being productive. So really the thing about today for me is, and as I said, I've been lucky to be on the receiving end as you and I swap over, right? Mr. Miyagi and Daniel's son. Sometimes you're Mr. Miyagi, sometimes I'm Daniel's son, and vice versa. But today you are Mr. Miyagi, and I'm going to be Daniel's son to learn how to improve myself in terms of my time management and use AI as well.
Wow, excellent. Thanks a lot. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I can't see any, you can't see the response, but I'm guessing if I was to ask people what are their biggest challenges in this current world, it would be distraction and getting things done. And so there is a paradox.
Well, what we can do, sorry, just a very one of the things, and Jahisha is on, for those of you dialed in, Jahisha is live in the background, making sure we get your questions up and running. But look, in the comments, why don't you take me, look, we're going to keep going through, Toya, anyway, but maybe put in what are your biggest challenges at the moment in the era, so at least we can capture them. And then if we don't answer them through the presentation, Toya, maybe we can address some of them towards the end.
Yes, that would be brilliant. Yeah, because it'd be good to sort of get that sense check. But yeah, I mean, as you've mentioned, the paradox of AI adoption. So we are living in a rapidly changing world, and the one thing that is certain is that AI is here to stay. It's not going away. So, like it or not, what that means is we need to know how to manage it or use it efficiently in order for us to be able to be productive, because things are changing. The world of work has changed drastically. And I've ran some surveys, so I know this firsthand. And I've spoken to many leaders who currently would tell me that, yes, they're trying to adopt it and they're trying to embrace it. But in some situations, it's taking more time. And just like with anything, you have to really figure out what is it that we're trying to achieve. And one of the reasons why this is happening is because I don't know if you've heard of the term AI first, or you've got to be an AI first company. You've got to be an AI first, in terms of implementation. And that's actually a danger, which I'll get to in a few minutes. And the main reason why we're finding all this challenging is because it's now impacting our time. And so if you were a person that in the past you knew how to, focus and get things done, well, the reason is because you perhaps understood that what I'm about to share with you is that time management has never worked. Okay. And I used to run time management workshops. We call it time management, but eventually we come to the conclusion that it's really not time we're trying to manage. We're trying to manage ourselves. So really, the situation has always been a self-management issue, right? And so the reason is because you can't manage time. You can only manage yourself. And once we understand that, then now we can begin to see why the AI issue is becoming a bit more complex. Because in the past, when we were able to manage ourselves, it was because we were perhaps more in control of the things that were affecting us. But there's a lot of research now that's showing that, yes, we need to figure out how to embrace AI, but we also now need to be educated even more in terms of our mind, right? And the one thing that hasn't changed and that is not changing and perhaps will never change is how our brain operates. And that's the one thing that's constant in all this evolution that we're going through over the years. And so a few
Toya,
things.
Probably a quick one for you, just as a question there, right? So I don't want to get into the whole AI universe that we're going into. In your working career, you've been involved as a trainer, a coach, and what most people won't know on this this call is actually you were actually a quota carrier in your first job as a sales rep as well, right? In terms of the technical jumps, how is this one different from when the internet came in and people start using mobile phones?
Yeah, that's a really good question, which is brilliant because it sets up my next slide. How this is different is because of these three things. Number one, is cognitive overload. Now, just with the internet, we were already facing cognitive overload, where we're managing so many things, already. But the problem is now is that it's exponential information. So that's the first thing, which is now, all you have to do is just ask ChatGPT one or two things, and it can give you as many and you can be a never-ending story. So that's the first thing, which, as you said, in the days before mobile phones, those who could remember what that was like. There wasn't anything that, you could go somewhere and not be disturbed. Now you have access to information all the time. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is what's called cognitive debt. And cognitive debt is where we become reliant on the tool, and that's not actually helping our thinking. This is making sense. So before, at least, there were things where we had to reason. Now you don't have to think. You can just ask and it gives you an answer. And that doesn't really mean that you process that thinking. So this is the reason why this is becoming a bit more, is slightly different. The best way to describe that is, I don't know, anybody who's listening to this, when you've used a GPS to get to somewhere. And for those of us that can remember when you needed a map, right? When you needed the map to get to a place, you used your cognitive resources to think it through, and you paid attention to the petrol station, the post office, and what that is, you were engaged in the process. And so by the time you got to the destination, you could remember getting there. You use a GPS, many times you just follow the mobile phone, and so you get there, but you don't know how you got there. Research is showing that a lot of us now are becoming more like that, and what that is doing is that it's impacting even our cognitive, our reasoning, our critical thinking. So that's becoming quite, it's really important. And then the third reason is what's called context switching. Again, context switching is something that we all know about, but even more now, it's where you dabble with one thing and then you go to the next. You dabble with another and then you go to the next. And so you are losing a lot more time, and that's actually impacting our mental state, our ability to focus, and our ability to be productive. So even for me, these are things that I've, over the years, that I've noticed that, wow, I've got to really pay attention to the things that I'm doing and focus on the few things that are important. And that's what's coming out of this, that yes, we can use AI, but how we use AI is also important. So I didn't put it on the slide here, but one of the things that is as a good habit is to think first, then use AI. Is to do some critical thinking first, and then take that to AI. Because by doing that, you're not losing your own processing of things, and I think that's becoming quite essential.
So would you say on that particular point, bearing in mind we're talking about AI today, right? Is AI now making it harder for us to actually cut through the noise to actually focus on the real problem? Because one of the things it's one of the questions I think we'll answer later on is, in leadership, how can you use AI to help you? Is one of the questions that's come out. Is part of the problem exactly what you're describing, is actually being clear on those boundaries about when you will use AI and when you will carry on being human first.
Yeah, it is, and this is something that only an individual can do for themselves, which is you can do the lazy route, which you just go into AI and you just try and figure it out from there, or you do your own research, or you go back to how things were before, and then take that to AI. So that's something that in terms of working with some leaders to help them to realize, to not lose certain aspects, because one of the things that we also encourage a lot is that there's the element of us being human that is at danger of being lost. Because if I also ask you, Karpesh, has every decision you've made been logical?
Probably depends who you ask, Toye. If you ask my wife, she'll probably say no. But I think the answer, yeah. I mean, look, when you have a human first decision process, you always have some rationale that you kind of use. And I know sometimes with AI, and if you don't understand the output of AI, and it gives you, false dawns and sort of hallucinations, your decision will not be logical.
Yeah. Yes. But then at the same time, also, not every decision needs to be logical. There's sometimes there are decisions that we make that's intuitive. And that's the whole point, is that there's a whole range of us being human beings. And so absolutely, we can dig into the data, and absolutely there's a lot of help that comes from the AI that can help us to make logical decisions. But there's some decisions that it's not about the logic, it's about the intuition, it's about the situation. So you want to be able to know how to balance that, and that becomes essential. And that's something that in leadership, it has to be talked about, or else everybody just follows the robot, which would be a problem. And as I said, and one of the things that I have observed is one of the biggest mistakes that recruitment businesses sometimes make is that they jump straight in to AI. And we might think that there's not a problem with that, but when we really think about it, the main thing that is essential is to, first of all, have a system or process around what you're doing, and then take it to AI. Again, a lot of people, talk about being an AI first company, which could mean different things, right? But one of the things that we notice is that if you don't have a process around what you're doing, then AI is only going to make it more chaotic. So if you have a system around how you write your job spec, or how you write your adverts, or any framework that has an easy, repeatable process, then the first step is to clarify that first. Write that down, map it out. And then when you take it to AI, then you systematize it and you automate it. And you know this, obviously, Karpesh, that's something that you do.
So actually, one of I'm going to just at various points throw things in.
Yeah.
Easy, repeatable process. That's one thing to take away before you start jumping into AI. Make sure you got that done. You have your system and your framework.
Yeah, and that's how you leverage AI. And that's also one of the reasons why you shouldn't just immediately say, "Oh, we're going to adopt AI," because if you don't have the systems and processes in place, what are you automating? And
it's really interesting. We've got a question, Toye, from Mark Bernard. Hi, Mark. And one of the questions asked is actually in some observation and a question. It's you're talking about getting the systems and frameworks done before you use AI, and not outsourcing your decision making to AI as a leader or as a business owner, etc. But one of the things that Mark highlights is actually to build time in, actually to learn how to use AI, also is a time stealer.
Yes, it is. It is a time stealer, and so it depends on what you're learning, though. And I think so this would mean putting things in different categories. So if you're learning something new, then you have to put in the time and the work in order to understand that. But I think for now, if we're talking about using AI to enhance your business, then you should be looking at the things that are already working, the systems that you already have, and then leveraging that.
Okay, brilliant.
First. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So that's the first thing, which is having that clarity, first. And then the other thing that we notice because of this tool, this wonderful tool, AI, is that one of the reasons why, to come back to your question about what am I seeing that's different from even the internet, and before that, is that so research that we now see, and many of us can relate to this. In the past, let's say it took you, an hour to go through 10 profiles, just using that as an example. Now, with AI, it can take you 10 minutes. Now, the logical thing is, oh, wow, that's saved me time. But what we would typically do is we would now still spend that same 60 minutes and actually do 100 or 60 profiles. And then in doing that, we have then created more complexity. So coming back to Mark's question, that's how it ends up sometimes making us, it wastes more time, because the thing that we could have just done 10 on and maybe try and fine tune that so that we've got something that's more effective, and then use that remaining 50 minutes for something else. That's saving time. But what we will do is we'll still extend that same 60 minutes and do more of the thing. And this is something called the markup. It's actually something that has been identified as an issue of what we go through. Whenever new technology comes in, we will say it saves us time, but we will still use the same amount of time to do more of the thing. And that's one of the reasons why it causes overwhelm, and that we now need a solution around how to deal with that, which I'm going to share with you. But any questions that you've got from that, Kalpesh? Just keep
No, perfectly clear.
Yeah. All right. So how do we deal with this? Again, some of the old principles still apply, and that's the reason why I've always taught principles are the key. Even though we know these things, our biggest challenge is that we don't apply them. And I'll get to that, about how we can ensure that we apply things. So one of my frameworks is the 4Ps planning framework. And as I started to develop courses and training, knowing that we are now what's called, we've always, well, in this current world, we are called knowledge workers, right? And that's how has been the task is, or how do we become more effective, since it's not necessarily that we're creating widgets. And so the 4Ps planning framework was created in order to deal with making sure that we don't have cognitive overload, and we have a system of how we work through work in a way that makes sense. So what does this look like? First, before I go into the 4Ps, one of the things I also talk about is, in the world that we're in today, you'll find that we need to work in what's called sprints. So in the past, we would say we'll have a whole year plan and try and just focus on that. But what we observe now is it is better to work in what I call 91-day cycles. So I've got something called the 91-day protocol, which means that you only set your sort of focus around a 91-day period, because the world is changing so drastically. In the next 91 days, who knows what? And so by just doing that, it helps you to manage the situations. So the first thing that you can do is to set your goals. And I would normally encourage 3 most important goals for the next 91 days. And by doing that, it helps you to say yes to certain things and no to others. So as a business owner, for instance, you might say, next 91 days, increase revenue, hire a new staff member, and something personal, take a 1-week vacation. Or it could be develop Johnny to be self-sufficient. 3 most important goals, and you make them the hierarchy of your decision making. Now, the most important thing is that you do that before you get into the 91 days period, because again, that's what's guiding you on your yeses and nos. That's the first thing. And then once you've got that, then the 4Ps then begins to make sense, because what you're looking at is you're looking at the people that you need to get with, right? So who do you need to connect with? And this is on a weekly basis. So you're always thinking about the people that are either aligned to those goals or other aspects of life. So that's an important part. So you got your family, which is important. So you got your clients, your team members. So you're always scheduling these rocks. We've talked about this, Kalpesh. You got to schedule your priorities, right? So that never changes. Now, we know what the problem is. We schedule the priorities, and then the priorities do get moved. But the first thing we have to do is we need to schedule those rocks. That's the first thing. The second thing is the projects, and this is where we are looking at those three things that I've mentioned in terms of them becoming the priority. And so this is where we begin to, put our focus, to say we always have a project one. And by doing that, that's going to help us say yes and no to certain things. And then the other two are processes. Now, this is where we can start to utilize AI, right, at its best. Because I've asked many people, you go to meetings, you have your AI backlog, you have the transcripts, you have the manuscripts, you have all these data. When do you actually get to process it? And so this is the reason why we now need processing time to process things in order to become more efficient and effective.
I think this was one where when you and I started having this conversation about 9 months ago, and you called me out very eloquently. You keep recording all these conversations. Do you actually listen to them? I was like, you're right, I don't. So I think part of this, and if I go back to a few years, it was all about time blocking and etc. And I think the world we're in now, that doesn't work as linear. But you're absolutely right. I mean, what you've got highlighted under process, AI backlog management, and that's the reality. We are churning out so much content now using AI and voice recording, etc. Is how does it come through together? So I think it's actually I like the way you got the first two P's right first, and then you. I was a bit worried on the previous slide. It's like you haven't mentioned AI once. Now I know why.
Yeah, I mean, and again, remember what we're talking about: redesigning leadership, right? It's interesting you mentioned that because it's something that can easily take over everything, isn't it? Like we've got to put our people. People will always be important. That's never going to change. But yeah, anyway, it's good that you noticed that. And then we've got our priorities, yeah. And then again, priority tasks, things that we need to do, and just this is helping us to manage things. We're never going to be perfect, but once we have a framework, we can even take this framework into AI and have conversations with ChatGPT or whichever LLM model you use.
I was just say you can't endorse a particular product; they're all
unicorns. Yeah, I know. Whichever one you want to use, right? But can you see now how once we've got the framework, it can ask you the question and say who are the most important people, and then use that this, and that, and then you can say, okay, what are my projects and what's project one, and you can actually train your AI to ask you questions where you need to answer them one at a time. And so what you're now doing is that you're developing a system, leveraging AI that's helping you to become more human. Now that is leadership.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're going to use AI to help you become more human.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. I think you got the secret coming on the next couple of slides, haven't you? I feel it.
Yeah. So again, for many of you, most likely you would know this whole idea of scheduling your rocks. What we're simply saying is that should still be the case, right? But if you've got an intuitive AI system working on your behalf, now when you schedule your rocks, you can get a report at the end of the week that's showing you where are you spending your time, where are you prioritizing things. It's giving you data in real time on the things that you said are important to you and it's showing you whether you're in the green, amber, or red.
So really interesting for those that did tune into episode 1 and said if they haven't, we Tim talked about the craft framework. So, what your point about training your AI is exactly that, and how to build proper prompts and how to make sure the prompts make sense. If we go back through, so Tim has something he calls a craft framework that helps people get the right amount of context in at the right point. But this is really interesting, the fact that actually, the rocks and pebbles analogy still stands firm, that AI should enable you to deliver against your rocks and your pebbles, and then understand where the sand fits in. Okay.
Yeah. And so you can get it to ask you questions, what's your top priority, etc., etc., and then you can do a review, and you can actually use it for a weekly review at the end. And so, you can do a review of the last week and of the new week, going into the new week. So research shows that a lot of us know, in fact, the research that came said 94% of business leaders know that they need to do a weekly plan. Only 1% do it. But now we can simplify it. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. 30 minutes, a few questions, create some kind of scorecard for yourself in life and in business, and then plan the next week, and then try as much as possible to commit to it. Now, the problem that we all have, a lot of this, I'm sure many of you know, most of you would know this, that it's easy to schedule these things, but sometimes it's difficult to apply and implement. And this is where, again, we're looking at redesigning leadership in an AI era. Okay, just to remind you that there's been a lot of research about how do we then ensure that we can implement what we know is possible, especially since we now know that there's even more distractions. So I'm just going to begin to wrap up here. The Association of Financial Counseling and Planning Education, they did a study that individuals are significantly more likely to achieve their goals when they involve accountability mechanisms. And the probabilities of completing a goal and task were as follows. Oops. Oh, okay, I don't think this is going to come up on my own, but because it was supposed to be in the slides. But it was having an idea was 10% that they were applied. Consciously deciding to do it was 25%. Deciding when to do it was 40%. Planning how to do it was 50%. Committing to someone was 65%, and having a specific accountability appointment was 95%.
So we will share, and I know we did some last minute edits on your slides, didn't we, to try and bring some latest thinking in. We will, for anyone listening to this, we will share that visual.
Yeah. So having a specific accountability appointment was 95% certainty that that person will most likely execute on it. And just to wrap up, a case study, somebody that I'm working with, Dal, when we started, similar thing to what many of us might say, everything is in my head. How do I get it out? And so we put together this plan, a structured way of him knowing what's his priority. He wanted to scale his business, he still keep it small, wanted to hire somebody, delegate his responsibilities so that it freed him up. And so we worked together, and we've used AI to create some tools he's used for his podcast. We've leveraged a lot of these tools to promote his business, to market his business. And in doing that, to beginning of this year, I know that one of the things that happened due to the marketing was they were able to bring in a significant amount of revenue in a short amount of time. And more important, he himself has freed himself up, and he's freed his head up, which is more important, using AI in a way that is scalable. So that's what I wanted to share today. Happy to take on questions. If you do want to have a conversation about what are your top 3 priorities, etc., I'm offering for you to book a free discovery call with me. We can look at what you've gone through, what's important to you, help you understand your most important goals. There's no obligation. Obviously, if you want me to hold you accountable to implement them, we can discuss that. But at least you're going to be more clear on what you need to focus on. So you can just scan the QR code, and I'm sure these slides are going to be sent out as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Toy. So I wanted to go back to your 4Ps, and we, one of the big things that I find, and I think it's one of the questions that we've picked up from things, if I think about some of the responses that we've had, it includes things like, being overwhelmed, having too much information coming at you, running out of time, not knowing where to start. So one of the questions that's just coming is like, how do you make sure you don't get left behind with AI? I think when you're talking about your 4Ps and you talk about, and one of your lines that you used to regularly use with me was, time management is time doesn't manage you, you manage time. Mm-hmm. It's kind of one of your lines. So if we think about the same concept of AI, AI doesn't manage you, you manage AI, but we sometimes become at risk. So if I think about, you talked about the equity that's created in all the AI outputs. And for today, we're going to use, just for everyone's benefit, think automation, AI, ChatGPT, LLMs, etc., generative AI. Just think of all of it as AI for today, for simplicity. We know there's a differentiation between automation and AI, but for today's program, in your 4Ps, you talk about AI block management.
Yes.
So from a practical point of view, Toy, and you're a business owner, you're having to go through this journey yourself. What tips could you give to anyone that's listening today, saying, "Look, don't overcomplicate it. Here's one or two things you can do today to help you conquer your AI estate and your AI knowledge base"?
So the first, you have to keep it simple. It is more holding back than going forward. But I would say that some of the things that you can do, like what I have done, for instance. So I have a custom made ChatGPT that I can take any note from any meeting and that raw transcript and just immediately put it in. And what it's going to do is going to format it in the way that I would want it done. So it's going to bullet point it and it's going to give the action points. And that just takes, I don't know, less than 1 minute. So those are things that people can do, is create their own custom LLM, GPT, whichever one they use. Those are some real practical things that you can do immediately today.
Yeah. So I think just for the sake of the audience we've got on here today, to predominantly recruitment leaders, that are still billing. So they're responsible for bringing the money. So yes, for those. And one of the questions is, where do you start? So I think, look, two elements. If you don't feel comfortable doing this using an LLM and building the prompts and building the library, go back and have a look at what Tim talked about in terms of the framework. But most people will actually be paying for a note taker or some sort of service today that can actually generate the transcripts, actually generate summaries for you. So I think what I would say to anyone, just to build on that point you've just made, is, first of all, you have to make the time. You have to make the time to review the outputs. If you don't make the time, then it's going to keep falling over. The second part of it is, don't overcomplicate it. If you're already paying for a product, don't then use another product to overlay on what you're already doing. So, use one source of truth for all your content. And then the third element is that time blocking of whether it's over your coffee, over your your end of day before, when you're doing your day planning, etc. Go through your AI outputs for that day or that week, however you choose to do it, to go, right, okay, well, what are the key patterns? And whether you use a custom-made LLM like you do, or etc., or you've got a product, or you're paying for a time management product, whatever it might be, take all of those learnings and go, right, what are the actions from this week? What are the key learnings? What can I improve on? And then try and roll them forward into the following week. So when you're doing your weekly planning for the week after. But one of the things that we tend to find when we're talking to people at the team network events is they're overwhelmed with the number of tools that they're using, number one. Number two, they have tools that conflict with each other. And then the third element is they keep producing all these notes, but they never review them. So I think it's like anything else. If you're old school like me, I still like pen and paper as well. If you write your notes down, you still have to go back and review them. Write them down to half the pint. So I think that's one element. The second question I'm going to throw at you, just really go through, is, You talked probably about 20, 25 minutes ago about you set the direction. So you talked about your frameworks and your systems. One of the questions we've got come in is people talk about strategy first, AI second. Well, from a leadership coach, how do you explain that to people? Because that's a very complicated statement, but very simple.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, strategy first, AI second. Well, I said thinking first, right? Which is it's sort of similar. So the main thing is here is for a recruitment firm. Let me. What are some of the big challenges that recruitment companies face? One of the main ones is feast and famine. Feast and famine, which is that you have good times, money comes in, and then you're busy, and then you start to execute, but what's not happening is marketing and things like that. So if we were talking about strategy first, I would say that the first thing you want to figure out is how can we consistently be marketing our business, and that's an area, as I shared with what I did with my client Dial, just to give you an idea of the strategy was using the podcast. Okay. And what he then did was he took the transcripts of the podcast. He was interviewing these experts and turned them into mini books, and then turned them into PDFs where his candidates who are interested in that were able to download it. And so he was getting leads through the candidates, and he was able to now go to his clients to specifically say, look, I've got these, bunch of candidates. I mean, in fact, his brand value became so valuable in the marketplace. So that's what we're talking about: strategy first, and then leveraging AI. So that's just giving you one example. There are many other areas where we can still use that same thing, even in the simple things that you might do. A job spec form. You might want to, clarify what that looks like first, and then, just simply put it into an AI model so that whenever you're extracting the information, the AI knows what to pull out. Things like that.
So I to give you a live example. So I did that exactly. I use a transcript tool. For those of you who know, I also run an AI agent builder, but it's kind of a slightly separate topic for today, is about recruitment leaders. Every week I've now built the transcripts depending on who I'm talking to. It gives me the summary. So if I'm talking to Simon, right, I'll take the summary out, and I know there's particular things that Simon's interested in the conversation that we typically have. It will pull out those elements of that conversation. But then if I'm talking to someone different, it'll be like, well, okay, well, let's come through. So I think there's a lot of tools that you can use, but you're right. Having that clarity, and whether that's plan on the page, whether it's, we're not talking about a 24-page business plan, a strategy document. It is very simple. How do you have a simple plan? What you're trying to achieve? Then how do you use your resources to achieve that plan?
And sorry, just to mention, just very quickly, because this word strategy throws a lot of people off.
I was going to come on to that because we have buzzword bingo, right? So
strategy is simply a decision you've made that helps you to say yes or no. It's simple as that.
Can you say that again, please? Because it's really important we capture that. Only if someone's recording this for their transcript.
A strategy, is simply a decision you've made that helps you to say yes, this is what we're focusing on, and no to everything else. Okay. Strategies.
Simon, what do you think of that one? That sounds too simple.
Well, sometimes it is simple, isn't it, in terms of focus, and some of the things that we get distracted on as business owners take us away from strategy too easily. Big ticket stuff, that's vital. The big stuff.
So interesting. We've got a session without making it an obvious plug, but we're at the team conference. We're talking a lot about AI. We're talking about a lot about products and services. We're talking about, but the whole point about we're trying to get everyone that turns up to that event for that day is what's your North Star? What's your key objective you're trying to deliver? Then how do you use all your resources, all your know-how, all your knowledge, not have to work 37 hours in a day, but in the time you've got available, how do you operate at maximum efficiency to deliver the output that you're trying to achieve.
Yes,
that's a good point. If you're smart about your prompts, and you've got our schedule of sessions on the Friday,
Yeah,
and you know what your strategy is, you could ask AI, which session should I go and visit in order to execute my strategy.
exactly.
That would be a great
I think we can probably
great
make
prompt.
I think we can probably ask Tim to help us build that prompt.
Good.
yeah. I mean, but just to add to that, Simon, to say that that's an area where again you can create the criteria already. So it's the criteria that's already going to say this is you've got a scoring system. For instance, you put the data in, it says this is a 9. And because sometimes it could just say that, you can still challenge it. Why are you saying it's a 9? And then it can give you criteria. So there are ways of how, again, we can use the AI to help us simplify things so that by the time you get the output, you've made the decision, but you've interacted with it. You've used your own logic, your own thinking, which I think is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that just going
Yeah.
back to one of the questions we've got is
Mhm.
actually it's probably a relevant one. And Simon, we've toured this over with Andy a few times of how do we support the team members better on this. But it's the question is basically for businesses that feel like they're getting left behind. Where should they realistically start? So I think the starting point I would say is don't be scared. Right, really simply, AI is don't be scared of AI. Start simply. So if you're a team member, go on the Team Hub. There are resources around AI. We've got Tim did a session. We've got a load of these series. And the reason why we're running the AI Impact series is we want, whether you're a team member or not a team member, we want you to feel enabled to be able to succeed in this economy. So that's the first part. The second thing I'd say is go and talk to your vendors of any of your tech stacks. So, they've all got training courses. They've all got little sessions you can run. You can go on YouTube. OpenAI have just released a bunch of stuff. Gemini have released a bunch of stuff. Google do a bunch of stuff. So there's lots of free resources out there as well, if you want to just get started off. And then the final part is, how I got into AI. I just started asking people that basically knew more than I did. It started off with going to meetups, going to events, sitting in a room with people going, this AI thing, how are you using it? And just learning from people and trying to embed it in. We actually do have a resource coming, Simon, from the last session we did where we've actually mapped out the 92 steps in recruitment that can be AI-fied. That will be a team resource we're going to be sharing in due course. So I think the starting point I'd say to everyone is, look, number one, don't be scared, right? AI is just another resource to help you be successful. And I think you touched on it, Toye. It's like a sat nav. You need to know where you want to get to, then you decide which route you use to get there, right? Your point about strategy is really important as well. But I think the one thing AI will never do is hold you accountable. That is where you still need a human.
That's the biggest challenge. Yeah. I mean, to answer that question about where to start, and this is the whole idea of you start with something that's of interest to you. You start with I would even say it is better to start with something and then enhance it, because that way you can't be fooled. Because the more you know about something and you question it, you would know the loopholes. If you say, okay, give me the whole process of how I should bring a candidate from from beginning to the end, just map it out. It will then map it out for you. It's done its work, right? And then you can say, what about this? What about that? And then it's going to come back and say, oh yeah, actually. And but can you see where you started? And now you can enhance that. And I think so. I would encourage people not to be intimidated at all. Start with the simple ones, the Chat GPT or Claude, but I would say bring something to the table and then enhance it. You've got a process of how you are charging your clients. You want to make that even better. That's the kind of thing. Here's what we're doing. Give you all the information. Here's how we're going about it. What can make this better? The other thing to do with AI is to ask the contrary question. So you've given it information, it's giving you answers. Then you should say, criticize this. This is what people don't normally do. In fact, 66 people don't challenge the information. 66% of people don't challenge the information that they get from AI. But by doing that, you become smarter because it will give you the loophole, and then you can say, okay, then how can we make this even better? So again, it's a lot about critical thinking is how you leverage AI. That's basically what it is.
So if you were to, as a leader, if I was
Mhm.
sitting in front of you from Kalpesh that you met 15 years ago, going,
Yeah.
Toye, how do I become a better leader? How do I
Mhm.
become a better biller? How do I
Mhm.
become better at what I'm doing every day
Mhm.
using AI?
Mhm.
What's your sort of sledgehammer takeaway tip as a business coach?
Well, I would say that if you're a great biller, you've most likely you've got a framework, you've got a way of working. Yeah, I'll type all that out and I'll give it to ChatGPT or whichever one again, and I would then say, how can we make this even better? And I would actually then say, can we turn this into a framework? And I would work with it. I would work with it on that, so that it's giving you now a system of how you operate, but you're also now able to make it better. So you
Yeah,
have your leadership approach. You know what that's like. You give it to AI, say, this is how I operate. These are the things. How can I make this better? So those are the things. And the more you can think in frameworks, the easier it is to leverage AI. So I would, as you know, Kalpesh, I'm going to say this. I would always recommend reading books. Leaders are readers. Take the book, summarize the book, put it into ChatGPT. This is what I learned. And you can actually even get it to ask you questions based on the framework of that book. That's making you a better leader. How can I apply this? Then you have real time situations. Here's what's going on. How can I use the framework in this book
yeah.
to better my own experience?
So one of the other resources I'm going to put in today, Toye, I think for people to understand is you have a look at Notebook LM, right? So
Mhm.
the reason why I recommend Notebook LM is one,
Yes, yes.
you can produce podcasts. So I did a really
Yeah.
good podcast about, actually a couple of months ago, I put it on LinkedIn about how Fred Flintstone would explain in Bedrock to Barney
Mhm.
Rubble this AI thing. Right. And it
Mm.
was really interesting. The podcast episode came out, but you can create videos and you can create crib sheets and quizzes. So there's lots of resources out there.
Yeah.
Um, but I
In
think
fact,
just it comes back down to, you don't have to spend a fortune.
no, you don't. No, you don't.
You do need to make the time to invest to understand the
Mhm.
basics, but you then need to make the time to actually look at the outputs. And I think the
Yes.
key thing I tell everyone, and you know, I am a I love AI. There's no two ways about it, but I still think it is humans first, right?
Mm.
Um, AI will not make the decision. You still have to make the decision.
Mm.
That's the key point. You
Yeah,
can't delegate the decision making.
just want to also add, you mentioned no LM. I use no LM quite a lot. And one of the beautiful things that you can do with no LM is you can take any kind of note. So let's say you have a business, your regular meetings, and you want to take all those notes, and then you want to turn it into an actionable document. That's something that you can put into Note LM. It can create slides. It can create a mind map. It can create an audio podcast. It can create an audio video.
Yeah.
So yeah, if there's anyone to leverage on, I would definitely suggest that, because it's quick and easy, not overwhelming. As long as you, again, don't do the whole, it will take me 10 minutes and then you spend 60 minutes.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I would say, I mean, I've just learnt this. So I work with a co-founder for my tech product who loves detail, right? And he will produce 27-page
Mhm.
documents. Manjit, I apologize if you're listening, right? But the 27-page, and I put that into
And then
and
summarize, yeah.
but I just say, look, give me 1,000
Yeah.
words in a language
Mm.
that I can understand within five
Mhm.
minutes.
Yeah.
I work with another bunch of founders, and basically what we do for them is we've actually created a prompt, which basically whatever we're putting in as a digest, it creates it as a commuted summary
Mhm.
that you're reading on WhatsApp.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So these are things, and so those are the things that I would suggest, but not get too lost into it because it can suck you in,
I just
But yeah,
wanted to ask one question because I know we're running
yeah.
out of time, Simon. So, and then Toeg, you're the right person to ask this question because this is your domain expertise. You talked about mind maps a couple of minutes ago, right? So, we've had, I've been at team events where we talk about all these different things. In 60 seconds, you're the Toye AI version. What is a mind map and why is it so valuable?
Well, a mind map is simply mapping out the structure of either your thinking or a process where you connect all the dots. And so the idea, let's say, for instance, we want to mind map the recruitment process. And what we will do is we might first of all brainstorm everything, just sort of put it out there, and then we will then begin to connect the dots, making it visual, because what the mind map does is it helps us see our thinking in words and how they connect. And again, that's what Notebook LM will do, that it can take an article, a meeting, anything. And one of the things that it will do for you is it would mind map the words that connect to each other, so you can also see it in a visual representation.
Wonderful. I'm going to hand over to you, Simon, on that note.
I love that. Thought that was great. I'm already having a look at Notebook LM. Really looks interesting, and some of the features of that are really fabulous. I just to clarity, if I was still running my recruitment business, I'd be, some of the things you've said today, I would be scoring the different elements of that business now, in whether it's business development, operational delivery, maybe our tools and tech stack, our finance and accounting process, and then perhaps our marketing. I might score those, because I was in tune with where we are out of 10 and all of those things. Put that information into into a chat GPT, and then start to ask it questions on how we could do better, and that would structure. You could then take all the key you could make that into, I think you said, project or frameworks to really develop and improve your business, having identified with cognitive thought what's working, what's not, or what could be improved. I love that idea, but getting chat to ask and challenge and ask questions about what are you doing about your marketing, because that you scored that 4 out of 10. Well, and get that to ask you questions on development and process.
So Simon, we actually did this. If you remember back after one of our board meetings, we actually came up with a 92 question, I think it was 92 or 93 question audit for a team, and you and Andy were working through that to actually help improve the service.
Yeah.
So it actually just shows, but you've got to be, don't be afraid of the awkward questions, but ultimately remember the human is in charge.
Exactly. I loved it. So thank you, Toye. Thank you, Kalpesh, for yet another really incisive session on AI, AI in recruitment, AI in leadership. Absolutely vital. So really pleased that you folks could join us today. This session will be up and live on our Team Hub tomorrow. Anyone who's registered for this will get a copy sent to them, and we're going to update that slide, aren't we? So all the stats and percentages that we were talking about, Toye, were on the revised slide. So thank you for joining us, everyone. Thank you, Toye. Thank you, Kalpesh. What a great session. Cheers, folks.
Thanks
Have
all.
a good day. All the best. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.